Welcome to the Vegan Transformation. I'm your host, Angela Crawford. I'm a psychologist, a vegan educator, and author of The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. And I'm passionate about sharing the power of a plant-powered vegan lifestyle for transforming our lives in heart, mind, body, and spirit, and for creating a kinder, healthier, more compassionate world. And today I'm really excited to introduce you to our guest. Gail Eisnitz is the chief investigator for the Humane Farming Association and the author of two highly impactful books. And we'll be talking a little bit about those today. She's been the winner of the prestigious Albert Schweitzer Medal for outstanding achievement in animal welfare. And her work has been shown in so many major media outlets like ABC's Good Morning America, PrimeTime Live, Dateline NBC, and on many, many radio stations and newspapers. And her work has been really inspiring for me personally. I'm going to share a little bit about that. Um, Reading her first book, Slaughterhouse, led to me moving from vegetarian to vegan. I have the cover of it on my Kindle, which is hard to see with my background here, but more recently, she wrote a book called Out of Sight, which we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm so honored and thrilled that you're here, Gail. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks, Angela. I'm so happy to be with you.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, before we dive into understand more about your book and the work you do now and have been doing for many years, I'd love to just hear a little background, about what got you interested in this line of work, because you've been a dedicated worker for different animal protection organizations for many, many years. What in your upbringing or your early years led you to even be interested in this work and go on this path?
Sure. Well, actually, I grew up with two undiagnosed conditions. One was OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and the other was a neurological problem that wasn't diagnosed until I was in my late 60s. So that made me feel very strange and vulnerable. And when I was 14 years old, I happened across a PBS documentary in which a polar bear mother was shot by a man wielding a rifle, and her two very small cubs ran off to another ice floe and turned around and looked back at their mom in terror and bewilderment. And the expressions in their faces just was seared in my brain. It just affected me so deeply that it was at that moment that I knew that I had to do something to rescue animals in my life's journey. So that's what got me on the path. But it was the combination of growing up with some undiagnosed conditions and seeing that documentary, which made me relate to helpless animals. I think, psychologically speaking, that set me on my path.
Yeah, so, as you're describing, so you grew up with two things that were sort of mysterious conditions that maybe weren't well understood and that led you to feel different or vulnerable at times. Is that sort of what you're describing?
Right. The OCD, I don't even think OCD was a thing back then.
Yeah.
I was very young and I was doing weird things and I didn't know why. And nobody could tell me why. And I didn't learn about OCD until I was in my 30s. So
Wow.
basically, I thought I was very strange.
Yeah.
And the neurological condition, which is the backdrop of my new book, Out of Sight, um, was not listed in the scientific literature as a disorder until 10 years ago. So I fought for many, many years to find out what was wrong with me, going to numerous doctors, more than 100 doctors who told me I was fine. And it wasn't until I was in my late 60s that I found out what the disorder was.
Uh,
So those two things kind of made me feel very alienated and isolated.
yeah, I totally can understand that. And I'm going to come back to the polar bears in a moment because that really impacted me in your book and just now you sharing it. But before I do that, just to say it can be so hard, especially when you're young, to have something going on that makes you different and that you don't understand why you're going through it. And I mean, it's hard as an adult too, but as a kid especially, I can imagine that was hard. And I think I remember reading that you would sometimes, because no one could find an answer for these or tell you why you experienced these symptoms, you'd blame yourself.
Yeah, I did. I kind of turned it on myself because, as you said, nobody could explain it. So therefore, it must be my fault.
Mm,
And I really beat myself up terribly over all those years, saying I had a mantra, why are you doing this to yourself?
mm,
Over and over in my head. I just believed I was doing it to myself, although on some very real level, I knew I wasn't doing it to myself because the symptoms were extremely real.
yes. And it was something that was very unusual that affected you in so many different situations, like, playing basketball, being out in the woods, different things like that.
Driving,
Yeah.
yeah, being in my home, writing a book. I mean,
Yes.
just
Yeah.
affected me all the time.
Well, that is really, really hard. For much of my earlier career, I was working with people with chronic pain, and many of them, had diagnoses or didn't have diagnoses, but wanted a diagnosis to understand why they had this chronic condition and how frustrating it can be to not know. As hard as the symptoms are, the not knowing why or what's causing it can be even harder sometimes than the symptoms themselves.
Right. And just to give a little overview of what the symptoms were or are, I see the world as pixelated, made up of dots. The whole world is made up of dots, and that's part of the constellation of symptoms of this disorder. But I also felt like I had dyslexia of the world. I was very confused and things didn't make sense. Kind of like living inside a funhouse mirror. It was just very, very disabling.
Yeah.
So it was scary. It was scary.
Yeah, I could imagine it would be, this very unusual kind of visual processing kind of issue that affected so many things, how you made sense of the world, and it sounds like at times it would be worse. And yeah,
Right. It was affected by all sorts of weird things like air pressure and weather systems, just like migraines
yeah,
are. But I knew I wasn't imagining it, and yet I was being told that I was.
yes. So there comes in the self-blame, which I think sometimes maybe that's a way we try to, I don't know, have some sense of control. Like if I'm somehow controlling this, I could make it better, but the reality was, some part of you knew you weren't.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're dealing with that, and that affects your upbringing, your childhood, and of course into your adulthood. But then what age were you when you saw this program about the polar bears?
I think I was about 14.
Yeah. It's amazing how sometimes a visual image like what you describe can change our lives forever. I know that I mentioned to you earlier, for me, it was a program about workers in a meat processing plant that set me on a path to not eat animals anymore. Because first, the compassion for some of the workers and what they went through, but then it just led me to realize about animals and their suffering. And it sounds like for you, something about seeing these polar bears whose mother had just been shot and the little babies with the look on their face. Can you share more about what that experience was like for you?
Oh, it was just a gut punch. I just felt so I could just relate to their abject terror and their helplessness. They were just standing on the ice floe, looking back at their mother. They were so small, and you could tell they didn't know what to do and whether the hunter was going to kill them as well. And it was just like I said, it was just embedded in my brain because it was so powerful. And it was also the closing image of the documentary, their faces.
Mm.
So I wrote away to the documentary producer and got a little brochure which had the image on it of those two polar bears cubs. And it was helpful because it gave me people to write to, and because the documentary was about endangered species.
Mm.
So it sort of set me on my journey.
Yeah, so kind of, yeah, now move us forward. How did, both what you went through health-wise as a child, and then this experience with the polar bears, how did that move you forward with your work life as an adult, as a young adult and moving forward?
Right. Well, then I went to college to study natural resource conservation because I wanted to save endangered species. That's what I was going to do. But I pounded the pavement in Washington, D.C. for several years and ultimately got hired on with Animal Welfare Institute. And then I ended up working with Humane Society of the United States, and then ultimately with Humane Farming Association. I've been with HFA for about 35 years now, and it's been a wonderful career. I feel so blessed to be able to do this work.
Yeah. So I guess maybe then you can share a little bit, obviously you're compassionate for all animals. How did your focus, and what you share in your book shift into more what happens in animal agriculture and farmed animals? How did that shift unfold or that
Well,
focus?
actually, I started out working as a writer at Animal Welfare Institute and Humane Society of the United States, and then I threatened to quit if they didn't let me become an investigator because I didn't want to just write about this material. I wanted to document and expose it. So I was an investigator looking into all sorts of things like puppy mills and animal sacrifice and dog racing and things like that. But then I received a complaint from a whistleblower down in Florida at the largest beef slaughterhouse in the southeast, and he said that the animals at his plant, where he was working as a USDA employee, were having their heads skinned while they were still fully conscious, and that took me down to Florida to document what to corroborate what he was saying by talking with workers and talking with other USDA personnel. And I fully documented it. And he was fired because one of his coworkers ratted him out to his supervisors, although he had already gone to all of his supervisors about this problem. He had gone to his member of Congress about this problem. He had gone to the Veterans Administration about this problem because he was a veteran, and he had gone to numerous animal groups, and my response was the only one that he received.
Mm.
But anyway, we litigated the case under the Whistleblower Protection Act and got him his job back with concessions, and that is what started me looking into farm animal issues because um, I wanted to see if conditions were like that in other slaughterhouses as well. And having one's head skinned while still fully conscious ended up being the absolute tip of the iceberg. Things were much worse than anybody knew, actually.
Yeah. Did you find yourself, when this all was unfolding, were you really shocked by what you were learning?
I was kind of shocked. I was more just focused on getting the goods, going to slaughterhouses and getting the goods,
When you say getting the goods, could you documenting what was
documenting.
actually happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, which kind of fits into what you describe in your books, that you kind of learned in some way to kind of compartmentalize the emotions associated with all this and just do the work because it was a lot, definitely a lot.
Right. Yeah. I'm more than compartmentalized. I completely repressed or suppressed my emotions. I just didn't deal with them, which is not a good thing,
Yeah.
but it had to be done.
Yeah, it sounds like it was the only way you knew to go in there and witness all you witnessed in the slaughterhouses and keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of how I think it relates, harkens back to my OCD and my neurological problem. I think I learned to suppress my feelings young.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it certainly would be hard to kind of go in and do, the years of work you did, because you did many, many years of going into these settings and documenting and interviewing workers about what was happening. I think one of the things I took away from both Slaughterhouse and then more recently reading Out of Sight, your newest book, which, by the way, maybe hold that up now too for people to know this. We'll talk more about this in a bit, but this is a real, as we'll get into later, it's a real page turner, and it's one you'll want to read if you haven't yet. But one of the things I took away that I hadn't maybe realized before was how fast the line speeds are, in slaughterhouses, and that's part of, and they've gotten worse, it sounds like, over time. And that's part of what makes it especially hard. Like, I don't think slaughter can probably be humane no matter how you do it, but if you were to try to do it humanely, the line speeds are a real obstacle to that. And I don't know, maybe you can speak to that a little bit, because some people may not realize about what's expected in a slaughterhouse and what they're trying to do there to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, today, thousands of the nation's small to mid-sized slaughterhouses have been forced out of business by these mega slaughterhouses, which kill millions of animals a year. And as a result, you have fewer slaughterhouses killing more animals. And the result of that is you have line speeds that are so fast. The line isn't supposed to stop for anything because it costs hundreds or thousands of dollars from a moment of downtime. But the line speeds, they're so fast. One of the plants I visited in North Carolina was killing 144,000 pigs a week, and that was a while ago. They have since increased to 35,000 a day, which is even faster. And I don't think it would be possible to disassemble 35,000 toasters in a day, no less kill 35,000 live hogs in a day. But the kill line, the slaughter line, was running at a rate of 1,106 pigs per line per hour, and that's one pig every 3 seconds. And the last two administrations have worked to lift that cap. So it's not going to be 1,106 hogs per hour any longer. It's going to be whatever speed you want to go at. So the industry has won that battle. And for poultry, uh, they eviscerate 100. They were eviscerating 140 birds per minute, and now they're eviscerating 175 birds per minute. That's 3 birds per second. So
Just doesn't even seem possible. Like, how can, and it certainly makes sense of why animals are not always unconscious, or whatever as they're going through this. It's just the speed is such, it seems really hard for any worker to really do their job.
right. I mean, poultry are exempt from the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act, but still, I mean, the numbers are staggeringly high. We we now kill more birds in one day than we did in the entire year of 1930.
Wow.
So that's 9.6 billion birds a year in the United States.
Wow.
And so the result is, because you have these fast line speeds and downtime is so expensive, the line doesn't stop for anything. It doesn't stop for injured workers. It doesn't stop for contaminated meat. And it definitely doesn't stop for slow or uncooperative or improperly stunned animals.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seems like on so many levels, it almost seems like an unsustainable system, in a sense that it's just between, yes, the animal suffering that is inherent in everything you describe, and then who would want to be a worker in that kind of setting? It just seems like a horrific kind of work setting, and really that injuries I know are common. And then just the food that's produced from it doesn't seem at all like, it's hygiene or, certainly there's a lot of risk of disease from what the end result of this is.
Right, absolutely. I talk a lot about that in my first book, Slaughterhouse, about meat contamination and kids dying from eating hamburgers and things like that.
Yeah, which is important to know. I think sometimes, and I know this is true of me, before I became vegetarian and then vegan, I didn't really want to look maybe at what happened to animals. In my head, I saw like cows grazing in the field, and that was my image of what animal agriculture was. And maybe for me personally, part of what was a block was I think maybe we're afraid like if we know more, then we have to change. And I wasn't sure how I would change my life if I were to really know. This wasn't a conscious thought in my head, but I think unconsciously I couldn't imagine changing how I ate, so I couldn't imagine, letting myself really know. But I think, what I found for me personally, once a journey led me to learn what happens and to let myself feel the feelings of that, my life has actually opened up more, acknowledging what I think at some level I must have always known to some degree. I might not have known these details that you expose in your books, but I think I had to know that it wasn't good.
Right, but we're so indoctrinated to eating meat. I mean, it's just the way we're raised. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
It is. And you're speaking to something really important. There's just so much, as you said, indoctrination in our upbringing, in the media, in the industries that have such a large impact on what is shared, including things like our food guidelines and other stuff. They just have such a big impact on what we hear, what we know, and certainly our many years of upbringing, all these messages we get that like you need meat to survive or whatever, or to be healthy. And gee, well, what we find when we look deeper is not only do we not need it, that many of us are much healthier, without it, especially, if we choose the healthiest version of a plant-based way of eating.
Right, right. It was just a given when we were children. It was just a given, just like anything else. It was just
Yeah.
normal to
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah. And I think meat traditionally has been maybe equated with greater economic well-being. And so like people have viewed it as sort of like a status thing in a way almost, to eat meat, cultures that didn't used to eat it, view like, oh, now we have more status. So unfortunately, there's just all these different ties to it that make people sometimes not want to look deeper. But you did, and you kept trying to share it. And so I highly recommend your first book too, just for anyone that wants to understand more fully what really happens, and based on interviews, based on your visits to actual slaughterhouses and factory farms, and all the aspects from what happens to the animals, to the workers, and to, as you say, the tainted meat that makes children and people sick and die. Um, so all that's super important. Um, I'm curious what led you for your second book to write a memoir. What kind of led you on that path to write the second book and then to make it a memoir as you did?
Sure. My first book was just a general nonfiction expose, and it was very successful. It turned a lot of people vegan, and it sold quite a large number of copies. But I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to reach the mainstream public, mainstream consumers. That's why I wrote a memoir. I just wanted to make a book that was more readable because it follows my journey to find a diagnosis for my visual processing condition, and it makes it just much more enjoyable to read. So it's not just like reading a hard expose, and it's working. I mean, the reviews on Amazon by readers are just all saying that it's a suspenseful mystery that they can't put down, and it's a page turner and things like that. So I'm accomplishing my goal because I wanted to make it so that people would want to read it. And there's one There are a lot of reader reviews on Amazon, but this one stood out to me and I thought it was just so great. It said, find this book. This book reads mostly as a thriller, a suspenseful medical mystery woven into the heroic tale of Gail Eisnitz. And then she goes on and on. And then she says, warning, you will not be able to set her life story down. That's why I wrote it, because I wanted people to not be able to set my life story and the details of what happens to farm animals in slaughterhouses and factory farms. I wanted people not to be able to set that down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And for those listening who have read this book or read it, I think it is so important to write an Amazon review because books that have those reviews um, definitely get more eyes on them. So, and it is that just what you described, because as you share your story, both what led you on this path to the work you do and the ins and outs of that work, and then dealing with your mystery visual processing disorder and how it affected you. You want to know what's going to happen. And the same time, you weave in your work and the relationships and connections you made through your work in a way that I think makes those more challenging details about what actually happens in the, meat industry a little bit easier to read and digest because it's kind of interwoven with your journey and with relationships and other things that kind of open our heart and make us more able to kind of maybe take in the details that are not as easy to digest.
Yeah, I'll just give one little tidbit away. I won't give much in the way of the plot, but I was working at the Humane Society of the United States, and my boss forbid me from exposing my slaughterhouse findings. And it was extremely frustrating because the media wouldn't expose them. My boss wouldn't let me expose them. He was he was not a good person. Anyway, I'll just give this one tidbit away and just to whet people's appetite. Um, he just continuously impeded my efforts, and it was very discouraging. And now he has been sentenced to life in prison, in federal prison. So that was very rewarding for me.
Yes, yes. Yeah, he turned out not to be the person people thought he was. And this, yes. And
Right, and it also made me quit that job so that I could pursue my slaughterhouse investigation at the time and go to Humane Farming Association, where I got all the support in the world that I needed to do what had to be done to expose my findings.
yeah, that is really amazing how you note the different synchronicities in your life that led to different events that I think is also part of what's engaging. And so different things that were difficult that unfolded, but also maybe led to something that could have been positive. But I'm struck by your determination there that you had done so much work to discover like what was happening in slaughterhouses that many people were not even aware of. And you were not going to just back off and like, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody about this. I cannot totally understand,
Yeah.
all this work and you're telling me to be silent about it.
Yeah, that wasn't a possibility. It just wasn't
Yeah.
something that I could do. I mean, I knew that the hogs were going to the scalding tank alive, and the cows were being skinned and dismembered alive, and it's not something you can live with. You have to do something about it.
Yeah. And thank you that you did. You mentioned that you've tried to bring it into the media and you've had some success with that, but it also sounds like it's been very challenging to get the media to expose some of what you found in, some of these things you've just described, for example.
Yeah, network TV was very incredibly unhelpful. I took them into the field, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Two of those went into the field with me, and one of them actually took a camera operator and interviewed 12 of my workers who were skinning and dismembering cows and wanted to go public about it. And then they killed the story, just like CBS did and ABC, because they all said it was too disturbing and people might change the channel. I mean, that was too disturbing for me. I couldn't live with that, so I just kept pounding away to make sure that this information got out there. And I did have two major successes. One was with the Washington Post, who I literally implored, a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter there, to do a story on my findings. And when he eventually did, at the recommendation of a fellow reporter that we both knew, I convinced a fellow reporter to talk to this reporter, and then the reporter at the Post finally did the story. And it was on the front page of the Post with three photos of a live cow dangling from the bleed chain, blinking its eyes. And it was it was incredible. The result was incredible. It was one of the highest reader response pieces in the history of the Post. And Congress, when they read this story, they couldn't miss it, seeing as it was on the front page of the Post. They were outraged, and money was allocated to enforce the Federal Humane Methods of Slaughter Act for the first time. The law had been on the books for 43 years and never had a penny devoted towards its enforcement. So that was a very positive development. And the other case with the media had to do with HBO. We had documented a terrible factory farm, because much of Out of Sight is about factory farming, not just slaughterhouses. And in this particular factory farm, the producer was taking his old sows that were no longer productive and could no longer walk because they had been in gestation crates their entire lives, and kicking them and electrically prodding them and dragging them through the barn alleyway out to the door of the barn, and kicking them off onto the over a 4-foot ledge onto the freezing cold ground outside, onto piles of other sows that were non-ambulatory.
Mm.
And then he took a chain and put it around the sow's neck and fastened the other end of the chain to the tines of a front end loader, and lifted the forklift fork. And the sows dangled there for 5 minutes, thrashing in circles until they finally suffocated under the weight of their own bodies. And we were able to get that on videotape. And HBO did an amazing hour and a half documentary called Death on a Factory Farm, which
Mm.
is still available online.
Wow.
And it was really fantastic that HBO did that, because the networks are so captured by agribusiness, they wouldn't touch this issue when I had a ton of documentation, but HBO was willing to do that, and it was really heartening to know that somebody out there is willing to take a chance on the poor farm animals.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing both that no one, I mean, maybe not surprising given, like you say, the meat industry influence, but that no one wanted to touch it, but gratitude for those that did and expose that. As you described that, my heart is breaking. And I think, those who are watching who are already vegan or well on that path, it may be distressing to be reminded of it. And we might have our limits of how much we can tolerate the exposure, and yet I think sometimes for me I have to be reminded, even though I would never change my lifestyle now, it just sort of recommits me to how important this work is, and how many people don't know. So thank you for sharing that. I find myself curious, as you're dealing with this mystery visual processing disorder with all the different symptoms. How did that affect your work over the years? And maybe vice versa too. How did the type of work you were doing maybe affect your symptoms? How did those two things interact in your life?
Um, I think stress exacerbates that problem, that disorder. So it was the worst when I was really stressed out. Um, but it's a very real neurological disorder. So it also has its own a life of its own. So it it was bad whether I was working or not.
I mean, I was struck in reading your book Out of Sight how much you push through different illnesses and difficult medical things you went through, and beyond even this visual processing disorder. I'll leave people to, read your book, but there are times you're going through a pretty serious illness and you just kept working. Was that typical of you that, you often kind of pushing through, no matter what was going on medically? Or did you take time
Yeah,
off or?
no, I felt like I had no choice. I think other people would feel the same way, knowing what I knew about what was going on in slaughterhouses and factory farms. You just feel like you have to do what you have to do. And as you mentioned, I soldiered through when I was going through breast cancer, and I actually was so stressed out at that time that I predicted I was going to get breast cancer, and 6 months later I had it. And that was when I was 35 years old. So
Wow.
that was just, that was totally from stress. But no, I just soldiered through because when you know this stuff, you can't sleep at night. You have to do what you have to do to get it out there. So change happens.
Yeah, because you were witnessing it, seeing it, knew it, and just felt like it's not getting spread widely enough, and you just felt compelled to keep documenting and sharing however you could. Um,
Right.
yeah. Well, where did self-care and self-compassion come in for you? Because you mentioned for many years you were hard on yourself for what you were going through physically and visually. Did a shift happen over time where you learned actually to extend your compassion that you had for animals to also include yourself as a human animal?
Yeah, yeah. It took time, and it's revealed in the book that I was so desperate to get in touch with my feelings because I thought that maybe not feeling my feelings, repressing my feelings, was driving this confusion that I experienced. So I did everything I could to try to get in touch with my feelings. I did put myself in a rehab. I did a lot of therapy, but nobody knew I had a neurological problem. But one of the things that I did was I started attending a 12-step program. There was no alcoholism in my family or anything like that, but I was an alcoholic magnet for in my dating life. Um, so I decided to put myself into a 12-step program, and I've been going to this 12-step program for 35 years now, and it teaches a lot of different things. It teaches um, that it's a spiritual program. It's Al-Anon. It's for families of alcoholics, even though, as I said, there's no alcoholism in my family. Um, it teaches, um, the main thing is that I'm not in control of the world. I
Mhm.
always thought that I had to control everything and and that I was responsible for billions of animals, and that was very um, self-centered belief to think that I'm responsible for billions of animals. But that's just what I thought, and it teaches you that there's something bigger than me. It's not me. I'm not God. And I learned once I started learning that there's something bigger than me, and I'm not God. I was able to ease up a little bit on myself. I didn't ease up on my work so much, but I eased up on myself, stopped beating myself up so much. And the program has some interesting slogans, and I think they help teach me compassion as well. Like, easy does it, uh, how important is it? And in some cases it is important, but not everything is that important. Let go and let God, that's a good one. And it also taught me gratitude, and gratitude has changed my life. And I have a slogan that I made up. And it's just that the more I count my blessings, the more blessings I have to count. And so
Ah,
now I sort of live by that.
I love that. And so as you opened up to maybe talking to yourself more kindly, holding your self-perception in a more kind way, in these slogans, how did that change you or your life to include yourself in your circle of compassion and care?
It just came naturally. Um, it just it just sort of happened. I didn't have to do anything. I just started being nicer to myself and stopped beating myself up so terribly. And then when I got the diagnosis 3 years ago, I actually started writing my book out of sight before I got the diagnosis. So I didn't know how it was going to end. And then when I got the diagnosis, which I won't reveal what it is because that would give the book away, um, it was such a relief because that lifted some of the guilt and shame and the beating myself up because it wasn't my fault anymore. It was just a neurological problem.
Yes, it just wasn't yet understood by the medical system.
Right, it hadn't been established as a as a in the scientific literature.
Yes. And it sounds like it's an extremely rare thing, that's only recently been named and understood. So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And you're not alone. A lot of people do struggle with different kinds of issues that maybe aren't well understood and then feel like, yeah, there's something wrong with me because no one can name what I have or why I have it. And that's so hard. That's a heavy thing to carry. And so I'm grateful that you found some answers, eventually, and what interesting timing that you're writing the book at the time actually you come to this discovery. So that's really
Yeah.
cool. Um, Now, as part of your self-care, like, do you also have you over the years included things like, I don't know, trying to eat in ways that nurture your body or movement or exercise or meditation? Like, have there been other practices that have helped you in your self-care over the years?
Yes, yeah. Um, I try to eat as healthy as I can. I'm not the best at it, but I do the best I can. I meditate. I belong to a meditation group, so that's good. I walk a lot. I walk with friends, and that's really great because when you can walk with friends, you can process things, and
Yeah.
it's really helpful. So I do that, and I exercise too.
Yes. And I'm imagining, and that's great you do all that. That's, so important because we're holistic beings that, mind, body, spirit. We need to nurture all the different parts of us. For you, like eating the way you eat, which I think is vegan. You mentioned trying to
Yes.
eat healthy as possible, trying to get more of the whole foods in there when you can, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I eat a lot of uh beans and things like that, and everybody eats a lot of hummus, but and I eat a lot of salads and
Yeah.
pasta and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, has it been hard with, you were for many years traveling a lot. Was it hard to stick to your plant-based way of eating when you were traveling, or did you find ways to do that when you had to travel a lot for your work?
Yeah, I didn't eat the best, but I could always get a salad or a potato or something when I was traveling. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's always something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you still working with the Humane Farming Association?
Yeah, I sure am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell us a bit more about their work. And you mentioned they have a camp, some new things they're doing or recent things they're doing. Maybe share a little bit about them.
Yeah, sure. Humane Farming Association is an organization based in California. It's got about 300,000 members. It conducts anti-cruelty investigations, national media campaigns like the national veal boycott, which exposed how veal calves are kept in intensive confinement in tiny crates where they can never turn around. And that's been an extremely successful campaign. We ran ads in national newspapers and magazines, and we've seen an 89% drop in veal production. Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
And Humane Farming Association was the first organization to generate congressional and state hearings on farm animal legislation in the history of the country, so that was great. And we're involved in a lot of litigation, trying to make sure that people are legally challenged on some types of animal abuse, so that's good. And we
Mhm.
also operate a 7,000 acre refuge, it's 7 square miles.
Wow.
It's the largest farm animal sanctuary in the country, and it is so wonderful. The animals there are so well taken care of, and it's such a happy place because all those animals, the emus, chickens, pigs, goats, burros, cattle, you name it, they were all seized as a result of cruelty cases, and they get to live out their best lives now in this paradise
Mhm.
refuge. So that's really wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the work they do and you do with them. So, one question, how can people find you and your book?
Oh, sure. I have a website. It's my name, gaileisnitz.com. And Humane Farming Association's website is hfa.org.
Okay, we'll put
And
these in the show notes too, in case
okay,
anybody
great.
misses that.
And I have an Instagram, which is at Gail Eisnitz.
Hmm.
And that's basically how.
Okay. And people can probably find your book at any major bookseller.
Yeah, I just urge people to buy it or get it to the library or whatever they can possibly do so that they can share it. I just am desperate to get this information out to the general public, the consuming public
Yes.
that doesn't know what's going on behind the closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so important because when we're more educated, we have more power to advocate for better things in our world, to really, speak out, whether it be with our politicians or with people that sell food, all of that, just start to advocate for more compassion in our country and in our world. So thank
Absolutely. And I'll throw out one more fact because I have a ton of facts.
you.
But one fact is that 55 years ago, we killed 10 billion animals in the world. And today we kill 10 billion animals in the United States alone each year. And we kill 82 billion animals in the world each year.
Wow.
Farm animals, land animals, not including the trillions of fish. So
Yeah,
I
I think
just thought
sometimes
it's
people don't realize how much it's grown, like we're being pushed to eat more and more quote unquote protein, which usually people translate as animal products, even though plants have protein and are the source of all protein. And it just seems like people often don't realize that we're eating more and more of these animal products over time. We're not deficient in in protein, most of us. It's
and we're exporting our consumptive ways and our technologies. There are now hog factories in China that are 26 stories high
yeah,
that produce 1 million pigs per hog factory. I
yeah.
mean, it's just shocking.
Yeah, it is shocking. And then you add in like reading T. Colin Campbell's book, The China Study, how at one time China had much better health than we did when they ate a more plant-based way before kind of taking on our eating practices here in the
Yeah.
US and the Western world. Yeah, so it is. It just all kind of goes in one big circle. So is there any other final things you want to share before we wrap up today?
Um, I think that pretty much covers it. You can join Humane Farming Association if you want to. Um, write letters to the editor, particularly about some of the issues that are brought up in the book. There's some legislation that's worth writing about.
Okay.
Share on social media, but most of all, share the book because, as I said, and I'm reiterating, I'm desperate to get this information out there. Most vegans know this stuff, but
Yeah.
the general public does not.
Yes, so true. And it's just something that opens our heart and gets us to see can be that path that makes us want to make changes in our lives and then hopefully ripple effects that more and more people start to make those changes. Um,
Right.
is there anything that's next for you? Right now, it's mainly sharing your book. Anything else
Oh,
that's
I've got a lot of cases right now on different issues, and some litigation going on as well. But most of it's confidential, so it's probably not worth talking about right now.
Yeah, well, thank you that you continue to do your work and then somehow in the midst of all of it, find time to write your book and to share it. So thank you. It's just such an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Angela. It's wonderful, wonderful to talk to you.
Awesome. So, well, thank you, everybody who's listening, watching, joining us. Appreciate you tuning into the vegan transformation. And I hope if you found this helpful, you will share this episode with others that might find it interesting or helpful and check in again for when I have my next video or interview. So, just wishing you peace, health, and compassion. And may we all work together to create a healthier and kinder world. Thanks so much. Mhm.